everybody, Philippa here. Welcome to my discussion of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Because the transformations of this play occur in the forest, I thought I would deliver my discussion in the forest. So here I am, in the woods of Boonville, speaking to you. Love looks not with the eyes but with the mind, and therefore is winged Cupid painted blind. This famous couplet is spoken by Helena, one of the most intriguing female characters in Shakespeare, and a character who I think prefigures Hamlet with his capacity for introspection, for existential awareness. What she has that Hamlet doesn't is also a capacity for action. And we see Helena's action partially drive this play forward. But what we see first is not the forest, but the court of Athens, ruled over by Theseus, a warlord, who has just won a battle against the Amazons, and who has brought back as his prize of war Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. He's very excited about his upcoming marriage to her, and he says, "O fair Hippolyta, how slow this old moon wanes, like to a stepdame or a dowager, long outliving a young man's revenue." What we don't know is how Hippolyta is feeling about all of this. And this is one of the wonderful mysteries and questions that Shakespeare inserts at the top of this play. We don't have long to speculate about it, however, because in verse Aegeus, a father who feels much wronged by what he sees as a recalcitrant daughter. His daughter Hermia will not marry Demetrius, the man he has chosen for her. She wants Lysander. And so Aegeus begins this play making it look not at all like a comedy, because he requires of Theseus that he resurrect the ancient Athenian law, which decrees that a disobedient daughter can be put to death for defying her father. But remember, Theseus is hearing wedding bells in his own head, and he doesn't want those bells jangled and placed out of tune by a young woman's death. And so he says to Hermia, "You've got to obey your father. I won't put you to death if you don't, but I will send you to a convent where you will live in eternal chastity." He then goes off stage with Aegeus and Demetrius, leaving Lysander and the two young women to moan and puzzle about what they are going to do with their very unpleasant circumstances. Very soon they head off to the forest, and the forest, also known in Shakespeare's plays as the Green World, is a place that scenically expresses Shakespeare's experimentation with perception and form. And it's in the forest that the reason is shown not to be opposed to the imagination, but incredibly inflected by it. And I would remind you that the word reason occurs 9 times in this play. And fancy, being a contraction of the word fantasy, which had only come into parlance as whimsy or imaginative flight in the 1580s, just before Shakespeare wrote this play, fancy occurs 5 times. And what Shakespeare does in this play is to suggest that while we may think of the reason as very much divided from the world of the imagination, the passion, fancy, actually it's completely infused by it. And one of the areas in which this happens is when human beings sleep. And so we see in this play characters falling asleep all over the place, waking up, transformed for good or ill, but at certain points in the play thinking, what was I thinking? So here we have the forest. We have the four young lovers come to the forest very confused, and we here encounter two more layers to this wonderful, complex score of a play. Firstly, we see the fairy kingdom run by Oberon and Titania, the king and queen of the fairies, and the mischievous Puck, who is Oberon's servant. Puck is the character who places potions over the two young men's eyes, firstly by mistake, secondly by intention. But what happens with those potions is that the young men wake from their transformative sleep feeling completely different to how they felt as they lay down. And in one part of this play, you'll see Lysander use the word reason 5 times in his speech, where he says, "It's only now that I have woken to my reason. I wasn't in love with Hermia at all. Now that I have matured, I'm in love with Helena." And of course, what we know is that he needs to be put to sleep again, which he is. And when he finally reawakens, he is in love with Hermia once more. So isn't it interesting, everybody, that the women's perspective and purpose stays the same, and it's the men whose perceptions are changed by this magic potion, which is a metaphor for the imagination. I'll leave you to speculate and perhaps write to me on Ask Philippa about that. But I think that this play really heralds so many of Shakespeare's existential speculations as he goes on in his writing career, and expresses scenically how human beings are so complicated and yet share such simple needs to love and to be loved, hopefully by the same person. In the forest, we also meet 4 woodsmen, and they are preparing a play to put on for Duke Theseus and his bride. This play is an inversion of the plot of Romeo and Juliet, and that's why we know how close together it was written to Romeo and Juliet. And the play expresses the tragedy of misprized love, a tragedy that could have actually happened if the play Midsummer Night's Dream had been stuck in the first scene. If we hadn't had the forest, if we hadn't had the green world, if we hadn't had the magic potion, which is the metaphor for the changes and flights of the human imagination. Another important feature of this play that for me is a kind of character is the moon. There's a beautiful 4-line passage in this play. "The moon, methinks, looks with a watery eye, and when she weeps, weeps every little flower, lamenting some enforced chastity." These lines are spoken by Titania, Queen of the Fairies, and I think they really express the fact that when we wake from a dream, be it a dream of love, be it a dream of anything, but particularly of love, we still feel the dew of that dream. It may be a dew that is full of sadness and weeping, or it may be a dew of refreshment. But the dream of love is never wasted. There is always the residue left in the morning. The moon, of course, is also etymologically related to Luna, and therefore to lunacy. And so the moon in this play is a symbol of the madness of passion. Well, these are just a few features of this wonderful, complex, hilarious, close to death-marked play. A play that explores the proximity of death and love, of reason and madness in every human being. Bye for now, everybody, and see you next Friday.